Okay. Emma, would you mind doing the intro for Zach? I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was asking that earlier. So everyone, we have today Zach Gordon here to present for us. Okay, record. The way that we know Zach is that Zach worked for the Shellfish Group in 2016, and he's gone on to do a master's degree in Maine and a bunch of other things. And now he is at Connecticut Sea Grant, and he specializes in all sorts of aquaculture and is doing a lot of work on seaweed as well. And so he's going to talk to us about various benefits of shellfish aquaculture.
Yeah, so let me try to share my screen. Hold on. Do I have permission to do that? It says host disabled attendee screen sharing, so I can't at the moment.
Hang on, I can fix that. You are now the co-host.
Okay. Yep, that works. I can see that you're seeing it. That's pretty cool.
Oh, yes.
So thanks, Emma, for inviting me. It's really awesome to be able to come full circle and give a presentation on the Vineyard. I have lots of great memories of working for the Shellfish Group. So this presentation is I just switched positions within Connecticut Sea Grant. This is related to my work with the Milford Aquaculture Lab, which is a federal research lab in Milford, Connecticut that has been doing aquaculture research for many years. And I'm going to talk about some of the benefits of shellfish aquaculture specifically that have been researched at the Milford Lab. So first, a little orientation to what my position was, and there will be a new person we're backfilling, so that is coming. So NOAA in the Northeast related to aquaculture kind of has two offices, the Greater Atlantic Regional Fisheries Office, which does a lot of permitting work, and then the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, which does kind of a lot of the research that informs the permitting that the other group does and the regulations. And part of this network is the Milford Lab, which you can see down here in Connecticut, that does a lot of shellfish aquaculture research. A lot of the other labs and offices within NOAA focus on fisheries, but Milford is one of the only ones that does aquaculture work. So for my position, it was called the Regional Aquaculture Liaison. I worked with the Milford Lab and I connected the research there to all the Sea Grant programs in the Northeast. There are 13 programs, and the people you may know in Massachusetts are Josh Reitzma, Abigail Archer, Rachel Hutchinson, and Danny Badger. They're some of the extension people that I worked with as a part of this project. And what I did was I kind of connected all these extension agents from around the region, learned what they were doing in their states, and brought that back to the Milford Lab so that our research at the lab could address the issues facing the aquaculture industry throughout the entire region, which includes almost 40 shellfish hatcheries, 8 species cultivated, and hundreds of aquaculture operations. So this is a picture of the Milford Lab back in 1925 when it was first opened. It's been around a long time. They've done a lot of work in shellfish aquaculture, originally focusing only on Connecticut, but then over the years as they got brought into NOAA, became more of a regional effort. They have a microalgal culture workshop and they provide starter cultures to aquaculture hatcheries throughout the region. They host the Milford Aquaculture Seminar, which was just last week, where I saw Emma and the team from the Shellfish Group. They do consultation with the industry, and they do a lot of aquaculture and ecosystems research. And my role as the liaison was to coordinate this research between stakeholder groups throughout the region, be a point of contact for industry people and extension people from other states that want to learn more about what Milford's doing, and then lead any projects that have regional focus. So here's just kind of a list of some of the research that we do. There's a QR code. I'll share this presentation with Emma to distribute so that you can go to any of the links or QR codes. that'll give you all the current research happening at the Milford Lab. But I'm going to focus on these last two, quantifying aquaculture ecosystem services and then integrating these ecosystem services into regulations. So ecosystem services are defined as the direct or indirect benefits that an ecosystem provides to humans. So the two that we kind of focus on at the Milford Lab are water quality. So how do shellfish and maybe an aquaculture operation improve the water quality? And then the other one is habitat provisioning, which is can oyster farms, oyster cages serve as an artificial reef that may attract fish that then might be attractive for local recreational fishermen to catch, and therefore adding a value to that area. So with water quality is the first one I'm going to talk about. Nitrogen is a good thing. It's a building block for all life, but when you get too much nitrogen, that's when problems start to occur. And I'm sure you're familiar with these issues on the Vineyard. When you have excess nitrogen from whether it be septic systems or fertilizers or any kind of input of nitrogen into the environment, it washes into the rivers and gets to the ocean, and then it creates these algal blooms, and which can create dead zones and fish kills and such like that. So we know that shellfish can reduce excess nitrogen. They grow it into their tissue and into their shell. They do a process called denitrification, and then they also bury nitrogen into the seafloor. So there are three kinds of areas. And what we were able to focus on is this first one of growing the nitrogen into their tissue and shell. This is kind of the most impactful way that shellfish reduce nitrogen in the environment, and it also is something that can be measured relatively easily. So it's something that we thought we could tackle, and that industry members throughout the Northeast wanted to understand better. So part of what our project, we developed this nice infographic kind of explaining for those that are not as familiar that nitrogen can run off from the land. This leads to algae, and then the oysters eat the algae and put that nitrogen into their shell and tissue. And then when they're harvested out and new oysters are planted, that removes the nitrogen from the water body and creates potentially better water quality for the rest of the ecosystem and anyone recreating in that ecosystem. So one thing we heard from resource managers across the Northeast, these are Army Corps officials or town people that are trying to improve water quality in their towns along the coast, is that they wanted a easy way to kind of adopt this shellfish as a reduction of nitrogen into their regulatory systems, and they wanted to have scientifically backed values for how much nitrogen is really being removed from these shellfish farms. So we took this model from the Chesapeake Bay, where they did a lot of research on how much nitrogen concentration is in oyster tissue and shell, and also what size oysters leads to that weight of nitrogen being removed. So the length of an oyster can be very variable to the weight of that oyster. You can have skinny, long oysters or fat, short oysters. So there's a lot of variability there. So it took a lot of data to kind of come up with an average amount of nitrogen that the oyster inputs into its tissue and shell that could be used on a wide scale. So we extended this Chesapeake Bay study to the entire Northeast region. We got data from all these different sources, collected information on farms, the practices the farms were doing, whether it's floating gear, bottom cages, bottom planting, all that kind of stuff, where the water bodies were with the farms, and then also those nitrogen concentration measures and oyster morphometrics, which is tissue weight to oyster size. So this is kind of the data that we found, and we created a curve. You can see the map on the left here is where we collected all the data from, and we created a publication from this that gives a average calculation of, if you have this size oyster, this is the amount of nitrogen in the tissue, and this is the amount of nitrogen in the shell. What we found is that growing area and type of method of growing didn't really make that much of a difference, so we could kind of use that all with the same calculation. And then if we compare that to the Chesapeake data, we find that really interestingly that the amount of variability within the Chesapeake water body accounts for all the variability in the entire Northeast. So you can use the same calculation you use in the Chesapeake for the entire Northeast. So what we did is we put this calculation into a calculator. You can get the link to the calculator there. I'm not going to do a live demonstration of it, but I'll kind of just show some screenshots of what the calculator looks like. And what this calculator does is you can input, if you're an oyster farmer, you can input the amount of oysters you grow, what size you remove them at, and where you're located. And it will give you a report out that says how much nitrogen you're removing from that area. So this is kind of what the calculator looks like. You put your name, your culture method, the ploidy, which is triploid versus diploid. Again, we found that doesn't have a difference on the calculation, but it's something that is used in the report. Put your location in, the size and number of oysters you harvest, and the period of harvest, and then you can generate a report that tells you how much nitrogen you're removing from the environment. So these two images on the right are kind of what the report looks like, and we kind of worked with the regulatory agency, really the Army Corps engineers in this case, to look at what kind of language they want in that report to show how much nitrogen is being removed, the science behind these values, and a little summary of text that can explain, you know, what is being calculated here. Okay, and then the next thing that we did at the Milford Lab is we looked at research on how oyster farms might be able to create fish habitat. So again, another link can show some videos. This is an infographic we came up with. I'm gonna, if I can, play a short little video about this research. Okay. I'm gonna play it, let me know if you hear it, or if you don't hear it, I'll stop it and try to figure that out.
I can't hear anything.
You're not hearing it?
No. No.
Hold on. Try one thing. No. All right, well, doesn't seem like that's gonna work. You guys hear my voice at least?
Yes.
Emma can share this video. Basically, the gist of this project is we put GoPro cameras onto oyster gear and into oyster farms, and we recorded what kind of fish were using the gear as habitat. And we had some research technicians that would go through all the recordings and count the number of fish and the activities that they were doing. And we saw a lot of we saw more fish on oyster farms and oyster gear than on natural similar habitat in the same areas. So what we were able to show is that these oyster cages and oyster farms are providing habitat for fish that are commercially valuable fish, such as black sea bass, scup, and tautog, which are all commercially and recreationally fished in Connecticut. And we are working on creating a calculator for this as well, which should come out in the next year or so.
Can you still try to show us the video? Maybe when you send this presentation, maybe you can put the link. Maybe there's a link to the video so that when we get the presentation, we can click on it and watch it separately.
Yep, I can do that. That's kind of all I had. There's questions. I just grabbed these cool pictures. These are old pictures from the Milford Lab. On the left side, the person on the left there is Sheila Stiles. She was the first African-American woman researcher at the Milford Lab in the 60s, and she's still there today.
Yes.
And on the right is some of the first staff in the 30s looking at larvae on or oyster set onto oyster shell. And the person kind of in the blurry background on the far right is the director at the time, Victor Lucenoff.
That's Lucenoff. It's so funny when we look at really old pictures in the shellfish group. They're just kind of similar. Like back in the day, yeah, people worked without their shirts on.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's all I have. You can, if you do end up using that nitrogen removal calculator, we ask that you email us any feedback or questions you have about it to that email address on the bottom of this slide, es.tools@noaa.gov. We've gotten a lot of comments, and we're incorporating everything we hear and making the calculator better, at each stage. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I also like to add that Zach is working with us at the Shellfish Group on an EE Blue aquaculture literacy grant. And so, again, really excited to be able to partner with Zach on another project. And it means we also have some access to him. So, I asked him to do a short presentation, so we'd have plenty of time for discussion. But if there's, more that we think that Zach can, discuss with us in the future, then we'll tap him again.
And this is Nina from the Shellfish Group. We're also hoping to bring Zach to the Vineyard person, late spring, early summer, so that he can talk to us about the benefits of aquaculture in person.
Yes.
Zach, can we just clarify? So I know most of your work was done in Connecticut waters because that's where you guys are located. But it's still applicable to Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, Maryland, right? Like anywhere we have these oyster farms.
Yeah, correct. The data for this calculator came from everywhere, all the way up from Maine down to North Carolina, every state in between. We got data for this calculator, so it's applicable in all those areas. Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Zach, who do you think will be the types of users of this calculator? Like, I can imagine how I would now play around with this calculator, but who are the intended users?
So, twofold. I didn't mention one part of the calculator. So first, we want farmers to use it, and it will help them. The idea is if they're having trouble getting a permit or something, they can use this calculator, show the benefit of that the farm will have on the water quality in their area, and that might improve the social acceptance of their farm. But also, there's built in a reverse calculator. So if you're like a watershed manager or something like that, and you have the nitrogen load on your watershed that you need to reduce, you can put in the amount of nitrogen you want to remove, and it will spit out how many oysters that would take to grow and remove that nitrogen too. So we want resource managers in that way to use it as well.
Cool.
And has Mass DEP looked at this and they're on board with this?
Yep. My project partner for this was Chris Scalacci, who used to work for Mass DMF, I think it was. He's now beyond in a federal position at NOAA, but he's still heavily involved in this project. And I don't know exactly who he's worked with from the Mass state government, but I know he has had conversations with them.
And Chris Scalacci is based out of Gloucester now, right? So that was last thing that I heard.
Yeah, so he was in a position out of Gloucester, and now he switched and is out of Narragansett, Rhode Island, I believe.
Okay.
Zach, I have a question. When you use the oyster calculator, because I pulled it up on my phone right away, I was like, let's check it out.
Yep.
Does it save the data automatically, or do you have to, download the report and send it to you guys, or?
Yeah, you have to download the report and send it. It doesn't save the data, and we're not tracking anything you put in there because we want people to mess around and play with it and use it a bunch. So we are not recording any of that data, but if you want it saved, you gotta print that report. I think Sherry has a question.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So I was just kind of wondering, just what are you finding in terms of removal rates? I mean, my understanding is that you have to have just a lot of oysters to make a dent in any nitrogen removal in any area that you want to do that in. So just kind of curious in that regard.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. It's definitely like one piece of the puzzle. You're not going to remove all your nitrogen load from oysters. It's just kind of one additional way you can add benefit. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but if you go into the calculator, you can kind of get an idea. Um, but some of these farms, produce millions of oysters a year, and when you're at that scale, that really can make a difference.
Yeah.
Emma, can you give us an idea of some average numbers of some of our farmer harvests?
Let's see. Well, what's actually really interesting, what's so great about this tool is that before we would talk about how much nitrogen is being removed when say a oyster farmer sold product, but now we can also use that for if there's nursery spaces and the oysters are being moved around. So this tool can be used in like a lot of different ways. Let's see, I want to say that a lot of the bigger farms in Katama Bay, they may sell something like 200,000 or 300,000 each a year. And in Katama Bay, there are, I think, 12. Rob and Paul are here. I think there's 12 lease sites. Maybe there's 10 that are active. They don't all do 200,000 or 300,000. Some of them do less. Some of them do more. But if you're looking at it from like a watershed scale or a water body scale, so it's not just one farm, but then how many farms do you have there? And they sell oysters at different sizes too, right? We know anyone who purchases oysters around here is that the oysters that come out of Katama Bay tend to be bigger because they grow faster than they do it from Menepsha Pond. And so we'd have to play around with the calculator, which will be fun.
Yeah, and that's something that kind of came up. We want growers to be able to like collectively use, so you can, if you have a grower collective or something like that, you can just add up all your information together and then input it, and you can see, the amount of nitrogen being removed from that water body. You count for every farm.
And, and because we have Danielle and Rob Morrison on the call here and Paul Bagnall, who's the former Edgartown Shellfish Constable, they also write reports to the towns. And so they may be, when they're trying to communicate the benefits to taxpayers and to residents and neighbors, this will all come in really handy.
And is someone contacting the oyster farmers to, I mean, I don't know if there's very many or any of them on this call, so I'm just trying to figure out how are you getting the information to the oyster farmers about the calculator?
Yeah, I think that's our job. This just like Nina sat through a webinar that Zach and his colleagues did on this calculator just a couple weeks ago. So it was really, and then we heard about it at the Milford Aquaculture Seminar last week. So it really is really new to us. But I think that's the job of the Shellfish Group. Really is to send out a blast to everybody and try to let them know that it's here and maybe put it on our website. We haven't really flushed out the section on our website that would host this, but we should. And that's definitely a big goal.
I'll just also say that the webinar you're talking about is recorded on YouTube, so you can share that with people. We are talking about doing more of that maybe, and we're just kind of starting the process of kind of advertising this because this really just came out in the past couple months.
And I also want to add that I guess I'm just really appreciative of the calculator because I know it can also be frustrating when we have heard farmers, wanting to pitch the benefits of the farm, but not having all of the data, of course, and especially if they haven't started yet. They don't have all of the observations firsthand necessarily, or the hard numbers that then the regulators want to accept. And so that's why this is really important. It gives everybody like the ability to speak with the same language, I think.
Yeah, the best advertising for this is if the DEP starts using it for new applicants, and the applicants are going to start using it to make sure the DEP is using the calculator right. And then the rest for already existing farms, they may want to prove their worth, but they've, so to speak, already proved their worth and got their marching orders. So they're probably more concerned with making a profit than proving their worth to the community, but there is value in that.
I would also think that the towns could use it in their CWMPs, because whatever amounts are being taken out would be part of the calculations in their CWMP.
Absolutely. That's been a problem with trying to prove to the DEP that oyster growing is valuable. We run an oyster farm in Edgartown, and we basically gave up on trying to prove to the DEP that it was valuable. It was valuable enough to the town that town meeting approved it, and that was probably about 10 years ago, and has approved it every year since. So it's a valuable program to the town, obviously.
Zach, it's Danny. I made a comment. We need a cohort calculator so then I could just, boom, we took out this much nitrogen. We had so many bushels harvested. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah,
That's
we
where
want all those comments, definitely. We are definitely looking at other species. Right now, we're kind of focusing on the habitat calculator, which is trickier because it's kind of hard to have a hard value for the amount of fish production that's enhanced by a farm, but we're working through that, and then we're going to go on to adding new species.
Zach,
If you have any, sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask last question? Do you think that this calculator could be used for restoration, sort of? So, because a lot of what we do on the island is there's not just the private aquaculture, but there's the aquaculture that all the towns do. So there's the public aquaculture, and that's where the constables, are growing, yes, quahogs, oysters, scallops, and then planting them out for people to harvest. So say we knew that in Tisbury Great Pond, people were harvesting, I don't know, I'm just gonna, however many thousands of oysters, and they were a certain size. Could I plug that into this, or do you think that there might be a different answer for a wild oyster versus a farmed oyster?
So most of the data from our calculator is farmed, but there is some wild data in there. I would have to touch base. That would be an interesting comment if you leave that for the tool, because I think you could justify using it in that case. You just have to know the number of oysters removed from the location.
Yeah. If someone were to be able to say, oh, sure, you can use this calculator, but give or take 10% or 15%, or we just have a feeling there's more variation, then I don't know, even that would be a pretty helpful answer, I think, for our purposes.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we know that Zach has another meeting to get to. He's a very busy man.
Sorry about that.
Could I nonetheless ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Hi, Zach. I'm John Shirless. I thank you for your presentation and the work you're doing. It's incredibly heartening. And I find it particularly heartening. I'm hailing originally from the realms of the Chesapeake Bay and knowing people involved with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation to see such a great example of the virtues of collaboration. What can come out, something greater than the sum of its parts coming out of that. And I was wondering whether in the course of doing this, you all have seen any other possibilities for what else could come out of collaborating from all these different sites, given the common issues and common interests. Even if it's not exactly up your alley, but it might be relevant to your two colleagues involved in everything to do with regulation and other aspects of policy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That was kind of like the idea behind the regional aquaculture liaison position that I was in before I switched, is to kind of realize that a lot of people are doing this similar research in different areas, and if we connect them, we can have broader impact to the whole industry. The one that made this one so maybe easier to do is that oyster data like this, like tissue weight and shell length and that kind of stuff, is really commonly collected. and we were able to kind of connect with researchers that collected that data for various projects that might not have been the focus of the project, but they collected that data anyway. We were able to use it in this way. So that's what made this one kind of come together pretty quickly. But I can see, building from that to do other things like the habitat calculator is one example. We're working with people on the West Coast that are doing the same thing. So there's definitely interest to expand this kind of stuff further, I would say.
If I could
And just
follow up.
a quick add-on, John. So the EE Blue grant that Zach is our liaison for supports environmental education regionally and nationally. So the Shellfish Group is, participating in this grant to educate our kids here and to educate our public. And people regionally and around the country are replicating some of the same things we're doing, and we're borrowing ideas from them. So I think there really is a push at NOAA to regionalize more and work together.
Yeah.
Thank you. And my quick follow-up is, Zach, analogously to the provision for leaving comments, I mean, you mentioned to Emma, for example, is there within your coordination across the regions and indeed across the country, a formal structure to solicit comments to facilitate to enhance the collaboration you've already got and to facilitate collaboration on other issues as they emerge in the future, rather than having it something that's informal?
Yeah. There's not anything formalized that I know of for comments, but I would just say to either email the tool, email me individually, and I can try to share it with the right people. NOAA tries to make a presence at various conferences around the country, like Aquaculture America and things like that. They can't go to everything, so they get a lot of input from people talking, at conversations like that. But I can't think of anything any formalized mechanism for that.
Emma, you're muted.
When it comes to anything shellfish related, especially, we really want people in the community to know, like you, John, that if you have something you want to share and you're not sure who to get it to, you can try to come to us, and I might tap Zach to find the right person. But that's another reason why we're here, is to help connect everybody on the island to all the resources out there.
And I would plug your extension people like Josh and Abigail
Absolutely.
and Danny. They're all really great and they're well connected as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good. Thanks very much, Zach, for tuning in with us. And if we'd like to, we'd love to hear more. So when you come to the island, we'll definitely make sure that everybody can come and hear more. Your work sounds fascinating. I really want to look forward to looking at the YouTube video of the habitat. When I worked in the Caribbean, I worked with fish attracting devices, and the fishermen were always like, "Put more of those out." It's like, fake fish.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some really cool video in that video of like GoPro catching fish doing various things around the cages. So I'll share that.
It's really fun.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, Zach. And any of us can stay on for a few more minutes if anyone else wants to talk about anything like slightly off topic, because this is Water Alliance and we used to just go through all kinds of weird topics. So anyone else we can let Zach go.
I gotta run. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Zach.
Bye, Zach. Thank you.
Hi, Emma. Sorry,
Thank
I'm
you.
late. I was at a dentist appointment. So
Hey, Richard. Yeah, what point did you come in, Richard? Do you have any questions on what we just kind of listened
nope,
to?
I missed the whole presentation.
Okay. Well, Zach's going to send us the presentation, and this is all being recorded, right?
Yes.
Yep.
So basically so Zach worked for the Shellfish Group in 2016. He was actually the Phragmites harvest, the Phragmites research intern.
Oh, wow.
In 2016. And so now he's moved on and done a bunch of other things. And yeah, he was with NOAA, and now he's with Connecticut Sea Grant. And he mostly showed us this oyster nitrogen removal calculator that was just recently developed and released. And so it's a free online tool that any of us can use to, he was saying it goes both directions, which was cool. So as like a farmer, I could put in, I grow this many oysters and this is how big they are. And this is how many I sent to market, and poof, this is how much nitrogen is coming out with those oysters. Or I could be, you know, talking about water quality and say, well, let's see, we need to remove this much nitrogen. How many oysters would that take? We know the number is very, very large, but it can be used in both of those directions. And then he tried to show us a video that didn't quite work. But we've seen a couple of these videos. They're really fun, where they use GoPros to watch fish behavior around aquaculture gear. And I think most of that work was done in Connecticut, but actually I think some of it's been done in Massachusetts as well. So watching scup and tautog and black sea bass, and you're watching the small ones like hide in the oyster cages, like from bigger fish, and forage and just hang out and all kinds of fun stuff. So we talked about that kind of stuff.
Great.
And Zach is our NOAA partner for an education grant that the Shellfish Group got. And so we are planning on, and he has other vineyard ties, and so he's actually planning on coming back this summer to continue the project with us. So, you know, if there's interest and, you know, a venue and a time and a space, we can get him to talk some more about the various work so he's with Sea Grant, so he can present and tap into like what all the Sea Grants are working on together, and it's a lot of cool work being done.
Well, that's terrific.
And he said the next calculator that they're working on is an ecosystem services calculator, which sounds really complicated. I mean, I can't imagine how much work goes into that. So that'll be really interesting to hear about, because it sounds much more complicated than grams of nitrogen coming out of an oyster meat.
Huh. Wow.
So.
Emma, can you talk a little bit more? I mean, this is a little off topic, but I know Zach does work on seaweed and nitrogen mitigation with respect to the seaweed, and you and I had a little email back and forth there, and I haven't had a chance to read what you sent me, but can you just talk about that? I mean, I understand that it's not a big industry, it's not economically viable or anything, but as a mitigation tool or as an experiment type of thing on the island, can you just talk about whether that's something that can be done?
Yeah, so like you know, seaweed's definitely used as that is one of the really cool things about seaweed, is it's more of like a direct nitrogen sponge than shellfish, because shellfish are eating the phytoplankton, which are absorbing the nitrogen. So seaweed is a little bit more direct. But there's a couple species that are grown in an aquaculture setting, and most of those are sugar kelp and gracilaria. And gracilaria is like a summer-loving, fuzzy red algae that we don't honestly know how to eat around here. And then, of course, there's sugar kelp, which is awesome, but it loves like the main type of conditions. And it also is doing just fine in Connecticut and Long Island Sound, but it likes the water like deep and fast moving and colder. And so sugar kelp doesn't work in any of our ponds. And so Chris and Almadine had created a lot of sugar kelp setting spools. So, you know, the hatchery version of making the baby seaweeds. And they grew some kelp in the lagoon and also in Menemsha Pond and off of Menemsha Pond, like in the swimming area. And Menemsha Pond did better than the lagoon. The swimming area, I think, did a little bit better than that. And again, in the lagoon, it just gets like too fouled, but that's for food, right? So if it's getting fouled with like those weird bryozoas and stuff, like you can't eat it. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's definitely been experimental projects to grow seaweed just to remove nitrogen. I don't know of any that have become like real practice outside of like a grant funded project. When I worked at MBL, I did a bunch of grassularia work in Wacoit Bay under, grant funding. And so I grew a lot of grassularia. And so we had to grow it in the hatchery for a long time, which takes a lot. It has to be like tended weekly. It takes a lot of work and fertilizer and artificial light and energy. And then eventually you make these painstaking, adorable little bundles and splice them into these ropes and hang them out in the pond. And sometimes they grew and sometimes they didn't. So it's still a lot of like ropes and buoys and a lot of work. But yes, they definitely have, a nitrogen mitigation potential. And there's definitely a lot of literature on this. So part of my email response back to you is I can look, and I think any of us could find, but there's got to be some literature that really compares thoroughly the nitrogen mitigation potential of like shellfish versus seaweed.
Yeah.
Just to
Yeah,
kind of
if you're not
understand.
looking at it for food,
Yeah.
which I wasn't really thinking about it food wise. I mean, it removes other things too, like heavy metals and stuff like that, is my understanding. So it can actually remove a lot of bad stuff from the water. And it's just, yeah, I get it on the sugar kelp because
Yeah.
it's huge and everything too. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
then
I'm
there's
just really
other
curious
funding.
if it's something that's viable, like if you had, and we've got these acres of, acres in the lagoon that we've given to oyster farming, but seaweed farming probably net does a lot better than, in terms of nitrogen removal.
I don't think that net it does.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but part of that's because like grassularia, for example, it only grows for half the year. So you'd have to really get down to like grams of nitrogen per square meter of surface water kind of thing that you could do. And because the macroalgae need light, in the lagoons like pea soup in the middle of the summer, if you get, and this is what we found in Wacoit Bay, was that if you go down a little bit, even a little bit farther, the growth really decreases. So then you're not getting that, the nitrogen removal comes with the growth. But it's possible. But along those lines is, we've been talking the whole pieces, people all around the island have been talking a lot about codium, right? The past couple of years, we're in a codium like upswing, and it's a super nuisance, invasive macroalgae. And again, not a food species. It's not poisonous. I've eaten codium. I don't necessarily recommend it, but like that, and that could be this. So this is more along the lines of like, Phragmites harvest. Like it's already growing out there and it's a nuisance. So if in fact, collecting that codium, taking it out of the water, throwing it away, composting it, I don't really know, mulching your trees with it, I don't really, if that has some significant amount of nitrogen bound up in it, then that could be getting to the same kind of goal. And removing that nuisance species could have additional ecosystem benefits. We think, we're not, if it's getting in the way of eelgrass trying to sprout, or if it's dying at the end of the summer and suffocating baby scallops. I'm not sure. I'm not saying those things are for sure happening, but because I mentioned this to a researcher, we're talking about nitrogen, we're talking about oyster restoration and nitrogen mitigation, and she's an eelgrass researcher. And I mentioned the codium thing, and I think that she said that codium has nodules on it that fix nitrogen. Like, and she said, it wasn't supposed to be the topic, so we didn't get too into it.
Yeah.
But it sounded like the same nitrogen fixing nodules that like legumes have. And so if that's the case, because she went, oh, that might be interesting. So that could be a pivot to get to a similar goal.
Yeah, for sure.
Is the tribe doing a project with removing codium?
Yeah.
It
And so
didn't
the
work
tribe,
much.
It worked very well.
and the only thing that I would add to that in order to get towards this thing that we're talking about now is just to take some samples. And that's where we would start with. You would
I
collect
think
some
you need a
codium and
nitrogen calculator for the codium.
yeah. collect some codium and send it to a lab and have them analyze it for nitrogen content. It would be a lot easier to put into powder form than the Phragmites was. That was hard. Because you got to just dry it and powder it and then know how many wet pounds you're taking out and how that translates into dry matter, and then how much nitrogen there is per gram of dry matter. And yes, you can do that calculator. You can be that calculator.
Hey, Emma, I maybe have asked this question before. I've used seaweed for years and years and years as compost on my garden. But the more I hear about this collecting all the nitrogen and the other chemicals in the water, along with oysters doing the same thing, should I not be putting it on my garden, which grows edible food?
I don't think that's an issue. But it's the kind of question that, I mean, I should answer more like, well, I don't have the empirical data to confirm or, deny. But so there are some things like we've been hearing that codium concentrates arsenic. I think was it arsenic or was it another one?
No, it's arsenic.
But I honestly don't know if that's more than some other plant materials, or I don't know, like you kind of have to put that into like context. So I don't think there's a problem with it, Richard, but I don't know if the research really has been done.
Oh, okay.
Larissa, you want to jump in? Go for it.
You're
Hold on, you're
muted.
still muted. No, we still can't hear you. Hold on. I didn't mean to chair this meeting. I didn't really know that's what I was going to be doing right now. Oh, Larissa.
You have all the answers.
Down at the bottom of your screen.
Bottom left. What the heck?
Downfalls of Zoom.
Sign language.
When she
Get some poster board.
Yeah, right.
How about
Huh.
right up on if you look at yourself on the screen on the top right of your picture?
Type it in the chat and we can read it.
Yeah, right. Well, we'll get her. Hopefully she can type it in.
Oh, technology.
But yeah, there's
Masters
a
by now.
lot of different ways to try to chip away at the nitrogen problem. And it's true that a lot of them, these alternative, green type ways might not take out large amounts in any one sitting or something, right? Like it would take, Rick Carney, I tried to, on the back of a napkin, calculated how many oysters it would require to fix right after the lagoon MEP report came out. And it was something like 12 million had to be harvested every year. Like that wasn't going to happen. That's never going to happen. But to just chip away at it.
Well, yeah, they're all tools in the toolbox, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
as many tools as you can use, particularly when you're thinking about, the CWMPs and there's IA systems and sewers and stuff like that. Those are years and years and years away. And so every tool that you can use, particularly ones that, like maybe you take codium out and that's like easy to do and you can do right away, right? And maybe it only reduces it a little bit, but it's everything starts to count. That's the way I look at it. It's all tools in the toolbox.
Absolutely. And we also talk about there's the legacy nitrogen. There's the nitrogen that's already in the ponds that's like cycling through the algae and the macroalgae and the sediments and the fish and etc. And then there's all the nitrogen that's already in the groundwater that's slowly making its way to the pond. We can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. We just have to, so it's on its way to the pond. So even if we were to sewer and put in IAs and there's still all this nitrogen that's already here. And
Black time.
think about the, different types of phytoremediation, which is, we're talking about codium, seaweed, Phragmites, like they're taking out that nitrogen that's already in the pond. And so it's something that we can do it right now and it'll make a difference right now, as opposed to even if I put in like an awesome urine diverting toilet into my house, it's still going to take 20 years for that to actually make a difference when it comes to the nitrogen in the pond. And that's the scary and the frustrating part about the whole nitrogen challenge that we talk about all the time.
Yeah.
I hope Larissa's making progress because I really want to know what she wants to.
Doesn't look like it.
She frozen?
She's frozen now.
Okay, she's back. She's back.
Just a quick point, Emma,
Do it.
when you're talking about commercially, 12 million oysters is not a huge amount. The 12 farms in Catama Bay probably are doing close to about 8 million harvested annually. So you're pretty close if you want to give your pond over to aquaculture, and that's a town by town decision.
Right. Larissa, you look unmuted. Yes.
Hey!
Yes, so back to Codium. I did a deep dive last winter, spring actually, around the tribe's collection of Codium up at their pit up island, which coincidentally is right next to that buried right whale that came in the spring. It's a beautiful site. So with the help of Maria Abate, we did a pretty good net search regarding the sodium content, the different tissues that it has, that it hangs on to its salt, that it makes it hard to leach out initially before it's applied to the garden or applied to the compost. And there's a little bit of research regarding the heavy metals, but not a lot. Maria, are you on the call, by the way? No, okay. So there's one test project that I know of with Maggie Craig, the gal doing the biochar. She took a bunch of it from the tribe's pit. It was a little bit awkward because each, semi-dehydrated frond was connected to a rock or a shell. So it was a pretty heavy load. And she did a test for it in a biochar batch, something about activating or being a catalyst for keratin for ultimate plants or disease. Actually, no, it had to do with the beech tree disease. Anyway, Maria did say that she and the tribe are going to do some sort of test plot for composting and see what kind of salt accumulation and heavy metals might be present in the batch, the test batch. And in my own little kitchen experiment, I did a fermented sauerkraut with Codium in it, accounting for the high sodium values. I cut down on the salt and it turned out really well.
Cool.
I think I might have some left. I should bring it into the
No
hatchery.
way.
Yeah, yeah. And it's this bright, vivid emerald green. It was
Cool.
really fun.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So once
Love it.
the water's diveable again, I might try another batch and see if it can at least be cuisined up. Online, seaweed companies call Codium the vegan oyster. So apparently for cooking purposes, it can be quite valuable if anyone wants to get creative.
Cool. Like you can make a Codium powder and add it to a soup in place of like a seafood seasoning instead of fish sauce maybe, or
Right. Yeah. It's the unami aspect that's so prized, as well as its nutrients. So,
well, Andrew's going to be in our office tomorrow morning, so we'll
hey, find out. Yeah.
bring it up again.
Great. All right.
Cool. Thanks, Larissa.
Yeah. And Sherry, if you could put me back on your mailing list, I did email about that, but I don't recall, I didn't get this directly. I got it through Sherry that seaweed would be discussed today, as well as the oysters. And I was really sad to have missed Dan Martino's talk up here at Pathways on Tuesday. He talked about his oysters book. It's right in my backyard, but I had to miss it. So I'm looking forward to reading it.
Okay, yeah, I will definitely make sure you're back on the list.
Yeah, I'll put that email out again in case it got buried in the most pile.
And see what you
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Great. Bye-bye.
Anyone else got anything random water related?
At the commission meeting tonight, there is a gentleman, Stephen Rafferty. He's with the Water Resources Committee for the town of Falmouth. And he is going to come and present to the commission about the outfall pipe that Falmouth is considering putting in, and the research that they found, and with the movement of tides and water. So I think that's a pretty good one to tune into. I've invited the press too, so hopefully they pick it up. I don't really know a lot about it, but I definitely want to learn more about it. Make sure that it's not coming our way. We certainly don't need any more nitrogen. And this is the outfall from their treatment plant. It's not just raw.
Oh,
Where's the outfall supposed to come out of?
I am not sure. We will
Al?
find out this evening. I
Like, I
can
mean,
say there's like 130-page report. I will attach that and make it available.
interesting.
And maybe
Paul,
we-
you're muted.
I believe it's Buzzards Bay,
oh, good.
because the treatment plant's in East Falmouth.
Thank you.
That meeting's at 6:30?
The meeting starts at 6:30. There's something before that. And then he's second on the agenda, but I don't think it's gonna be long.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, and I think that's all the news and excitement that we're having. Richard, do you have anything to add?
No, it's interesting. I don't know what this says, or, I mean, it's been so cold, yet the ponds are still not frozen. I can remember, 10, 20 years ago, skating on the ponds and riding my bike across the ponds. Was it really that cold back then? Oh my gosh.
It must have been.
Short
loved it
answer,
being frozen.
yes.
What?
The short answer is yes.
Yes, I guess it was. Getting old, I don't take the cold so well anymore.
Yeah, me neither.
Chris, has it frozen solid down at the Vineyard Haven hatchery?
I haven't been there today. It's like we're at the line kind of thing. We're at the meeting of the ice and also the regular salt water. So it usually freezes like up to us, and then in the little cove, the little kayak cove that we have by the hatchery. But we had a little bit of melting earlier today because the sun was out, but it's cloudy again. Yeah, because I remember in 2000, maybe 16 or something, 15, 16, that it froze pretty much most of the way, and you could actually, from our dock, almost step on it daringly, but yeah, it was frozen all the way across to the Oak Bluff side. I think I'm gonna go and check on it today, this afternoon. We'll see.
Is that really good for the animals in the water to have it freeze?
Fine.
Does it disrupt any of the,
I don't think so. I mean, scup are like one thing, one
Yep.
fish that, leave when it gets cold. So in the fall, if we get a really sudden cold snap, then you'll sometimes see like cold stunned or dead scup and other fish like that. In the great ponds that have dermo disease, The dermo really hates the super cold, and the dermo parasite especially hates when it's fresh and cold. So in the great ponds, when the water gets really high and really fresh and then gets really cold for an extended amount of time, the dermo disease gets really knocked back. So then it reduces the mortalities the following summer. So
I was wondering about the aquaculture farms in the lagoon also. I was just thinking about this the other day because it's like icy around my dock and everything. I'm assuming they must do they lower the cages when it gets this cold into the water? Because now they have the cages on top, right? So wouldn't you have to lower them? Otherwise your oysters are gonna freeze.
the oysters don't really mind freezing. They grow intertidally in some places where they do get snow and ice. But I would be more afraid of the ice. The ice is so strong, it's bizarre. You know, if the ice were to cake around the floating cages and then the wind and the tide shifts,
Lift them
it
right
could
out.
move stuff around very easily.
Yeah, I could speak on that for a second if you wanted, Emma. Yeah, basically the ice can wreak havoc with aquaculture gear. For the town of Edgartown, we take all our buoys off in the winter, so everything's where we left it in the spring after the ice is gone. But a lot of the commercial aquaculture don't have that leisure because they have to sell their oysters all winter. So it's kind of a gamble. So basically you just keep your fingers crossed and hopefully the ice doesn't do too much damage. But the oysters themselves are on bottom cages, so the ice won't have any detriment on how the oysters grow, but it can move all your equipment around.
The bottom line, I think, is that it's worse to get too hot versus too cold, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Emma, very interesting, your description of the consequences of freezing on dermo. And I was wondering if that is one of the variables that's been modeled into aspects of things. For example, dermo, when looking at climate change and temperature records. So in other words, if it is, I mean, part, as I understand it, of climate change is increased variability and extremes in temperature. But I'm wondering if anybody's looking into this to get a sense of what might be down the line.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that because I don't know the answer to that. But because it's it's becoming more variable. Yes, I'm waiting for a shipment of a product from Louisiana right now. And he's like, sorry, I didn't get the mail. We just got 5.5 inches of snow in southern Louisiana. So it's becoming more variable, but if you can't predict that, then how do you put it into a model?
Right.
It would have to be, I guess it would be a very complicated model that would account for if the Northeast gets more precipitation in the wintertime versus more precipitation in the summertime, like all kinds of wacky ways it could go.
Well, is anybody looking at even just a correlation between low temperatures in winter and dermo in the following summer?
That they've done. There's a lot less dermo research going on right now because so many populations are just sort of tolerating it enough now, and it's not a really big problem in like the commercial industry, because I think mostly because the farmers sell their product before it gets too old, because the dermo accumulates like over time. So the temperature stuff has been studied quite a bit, but how you would apply that to the way that things are going to change in the future, I don't know if anyone's really doing that. Just crossing their fingers.
I think cold's not good for ticks, right?
I hope so. I hope you're right.
I think that's true. I think that's one of the reasons why they've gotten so bad, because we haven't had those super cold winters.
I've heard that as sort of some notion for decades, but I don't know that anyone's done the research on what the temperature extremes are for ticks. And then there's the issue that if they're in the duff layer or below, they may, even if there's snow on the ground, they may be insulated from the effects of the cold. Just because there's been was conjecture, well, winters used to be more prolonged and colder And that's why there were supposedly fewer ticks then. I don't know that the research has been done on that.
Well, I think that's the other thing, here where we don't have a snow cover, I think it's harder on the environment than further north where they immediately get a foot of snow and then it stays and then pretty soon they have 3 feet of snow. And that's a huge insulating blanket. So I think it's more harsh here on our island in this environment with no snow cover. And talk about the extremes again,
And some organisms are really sensitive to humidity. I don't know that much about ticks. Where's Rick Carney? Rick's the one that has been listening to everything about ticks. Maybe I wonder if it being cold and dry here is something the ticks don't like more than, yes, if there's snow and it's insulated and they have a certain the humidity is therefore regulated underneath, if that's a good thing. I don't know. We can only hope that all this cold weather is going to lead to fewer ticks this year.
Yeah.
That'll make me feel better about all this cold weather.
Yeah.
Just go out there going, this is killing ticks. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe because we have frozen mice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Maybe it'll knock back their reproduction. I don't know. I can only hope.
Yeah.
Anything else random and water related?
Richard, anything?
No, I think we're good.
Cool. Yeah. I'll get that stuff from Zach, including the link to the videos. The Milford Lab's been using a lot of QR codes. We saw at the last meeting. It was kind of funny. And so they offer the QR codes so you can get to all their different research pages and stuff. So I'll get that to Sherry and she'll get it around.
Great.
I will send this recording out.
And then I'll look for also that YouTube link to the webinar, the original webinar that they did on the oyster calculator, in case anyone really wants to dive into it more.
That talked about the data and the modeling, so how they developed the oyster calculator. So if you're into that, it's worth a watch.
If you're into that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Emma. I'm sorry I was late.
Oh,
Great.
Sorry,
Great group.
we moved the meeting a little bit so that we could accommodate Zach and having Zach come because it was a really great little presentation. So.
Oh, good. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I told him just thank you so much. Give us a little brief something. And so again, if we wanted him to expand on something, and as he said, and I didn't mean to neglect that, Josh Rietzma and his crew are the Woods Hole Sea Grant extension agents that are closest to us. And we do work with Josh and his crew all the time, and they're amazing as well. And they just kind of get into different types of research than Zach's, colleagues do. So I know like Josh and them, I saw something on Facebook, they were doing oyster studies on the Cape, so they're doing more with aquaculture, right here in our backyard. So, but they have access to the same tools. So,
yeah, maybe next month we could have the Sea Grant from Woods Hole come and just tell us about the research that they're doing and just how we can reach out to them and get more information about different things.
And now that I think about it, it was one of the things in the climate action plan. There was a goal about continuing to connect, island groups and fishermen and farmers. I think it might have been in the food security chapter with technical groups. So again, even if at some point, it doesn't have to be next month, but if we wanted the Woods Hole Sea Grant folks to come and just give us some sort of overview of the things that they do, then it's just our community knowing what they do and what's available to us, because they don't make it here, but we are in their their territory. We're there. We're theirs. They just don't get their boots here very often.
Okay, great.
All right. Nice to see everybody.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Stay warm.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Okay.
Great to see you all. Emma, thanks for getting this together.
Oh, no, it took Nina and Sherry and everyone helped. It was great.
Thank you all.
Thanks for coming.
See you.